Hello, and welcome to episode 0 of the Soul Roots podcast, where we add another podcast to the never-ending list of podcasts on YouTube. My name is Ryan Gaffney, and I am one half of Soul Roots, and the other half is
Pablo Vasquez. I'm the better-looking half of Soul Roots here.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool. How are you, Pablo? How is Berkeley?
All good. It's a sunny day here in Berkeley, and it's lovely. Just engaging as usual with Soul Roots works, my studies, and what have you. So it's a lovely time over here. How about you, Ryan, over there in London?
In sunny London, it is just pissing down. It is 9 o'clock at night here, the time difference. It's the weather's crap now, but it's nice all week. Finally feels like spring, and
that's good.
Just kind of regrouping after like a big month of work doing video stuff for my own business basically, and just regrouping and about to knuckle down and get started on the next episode and editing, and just onwards it goes.
Oh, wonderful. I remember how dreary London can get, so I'm glad that you're finally entering into the spring over there.
Yeah, thank God. So I guess on that, nice segue. For this first episode, so obviously like podcasts, they're a bit rough to start, and as you can see, I'm still not fully set up for it, but I just thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of just introduce ourselves and who we are, because we don't really talk about ourselves in the current series, and how we met each other as well. I guess we can spiral into actually our days hanging out in London a few years ago.
Absolutely.
I guess do you want to start, or will I start?
Yeah, well, go ahead. Maybe we can give them a little bit of start from your own sort of background up until the point we met, and then I'll hit with my own sort of background up until the point we met, and work from there.
Cool. Okay. I'm from the Republic of Ireland. I'm from a really small town and kind of close to the border. I was raised Catholic, in that very secular Irish way. We don't actually really deeply learn about the religion at all. It's just kind of expected that you are Catholic, and if you ever ask a question, you kind of get shouted down. So that was like my kind of religious upbringing, which is relevant to the channel. And I kind of, for me, when it comes to like religious education and reading about the kind of topics that we do, I kind of ended up getting very much into like Eastern religions when I was like about 11 or 12, largely because of anime. Watching anime series like, Outlaw Star or Tenchi Muyo and stuff like that, which had like Shinto and Taoism and like these Eastern religions and Zen. Shaman King as well was a fantastic series.
All three great.
Shaman King was amazing. It was a series where like it's basically all of the world's religions are like fighting each other using laser beams. But it was quite cool because it kind of showed like where I grew up, it's like there wasn't until like in later years there was like no diversity of religions or spiritual traditions. Like maybe there was someone in the town who was like some sort of vague pagan or Wiccan or something like that. But broadly speaking, you're just sort of Catholic and you don't think any more about it. So seeing media that was like showing like Eastern religions and video games as well was really interesting. And that kind of got me into like Zen. And at one point I did a martial art. I did like Ninpo, which is kind of like ninjutsu, but with a lot of meditation in it. There's a lot of Zen in it. And then there was lots of like more esoteric Buddhist stuff. Like didn't delve too deeply into it when I was part of it, but it did teach me to meditate. And it kind of showed me a different type of spirituality. I was also like, as a teenager, I ended up going to art school and I went to art school for a year and then I got into film and TV and studied that. And that was kind of my career just kind of went from there very slowly. It's only since moving to London that I've actually got anywhere with it. And around that time as well in college, that's when I got into like esotericism and like the Western esoteric tradition, like Thelema and the grimoire tradition and Greek magical papyri and stuff like that, which I guess branches off like from there briefly. That's kind of how me and you ended up crossing paths, was in
Yes, indeed.
the Western esoteric world. But you've had a much more colorful religious upbringing than I have. So you can take the mic.
Well, it's I would say less colorful and more chaotic for sure. Well, I was I was born in Panama, the Republic of Panama, and I was raised between there and Puerto Rico, just moving back and forth. My dad was Puerto Rican, my mother's Panamanian. My mother came from a fairly, liberation theology sort of Catholic background. And my father, he was, at the time he met my mother, was more of a Santero, so involved in Santeria and whatnot. And just, it was like a spiritual interest for a large part of his life. Now he's more what I would consider to be comfortably atheistic. But I was raised very much in a household that encouraged of religious exploration and encouraged a lot of, like reading and engagement with like other cultures and religions. Anime were the Saturday morning cartoons of Latin America. So, had my dose of DBZ, of Saint Seiya, which we called Caballeros del Zodiaco.
Oh yes.
And we had a whole bunch of other different animes that just popped up over there. So like Ryan, I had like my first exposure to a lot of these sort of Eastern systems that sort of way. And but I was fairly much what I would consider to be like a pious Catholic kid in many ways. In a very Latin American sense, where like in Ireland you're sort of like raised with it is simultaneously like culture and religion, and so I really stuck to it that way. But it became a sort of a matter of pride too when I moved to the United States, especially to such a like Protestant society in many ways. It was my first exposure to a lot of like different modes of religious thought, like various forms of Protestantism, ran across, Jewish folks, Buddhists, Hindus, so on and so forth. And it just all really fascinated me. I was so very open to it in a very sort of like Thomas Merton sort of way of just like learning about these different traditions to enrich my own. And then in my late teen years, I became really devoted to the idea of becoming a priest, and I wanted to become a Jesuit. And so I entered into the sort of like a proto-seminarian program for that sort of deal. And it was, it helped me decide that this wasn't really the path for me. Obviously, it didn't work out. I used to make the joke that eventually, it led me out of Catholicism because the church likes to claim it's a church of reason. So I reasoned myself out of it. But before I got out of it, after I left sort of the idea of becoming a priest, I entered into this really like traditionalist Catholic, a la Catholic worker, sort of like being a socialist, but Latin Mass only sort of type. Really doubled down, as a lot of people do when they're about to leave a faith, And then after that, I just started exploring, got involved with, Sufism, got involved with learning about Judaism, got involved with like learning about Hinduism, all these different systems. But eventually I did sort of find a home in sort of Western esotericism as well. And it just seemed to fit a lot of sort of my spiritual outlooks a lot more. And also when you're in Latin America, you're sort of raised in this sort of esoteric milieu in many ways. And so what really happens there is I felt like it wasn't like I was discovering something new, but rather just like coming back into things that were already part of my interest. The grimoires are already interesting to me as a Catholic because a lot of the grimoires require you to be a faithful pure practicing Catholic in order to like achieve the great aims of whatever you're trying to do there. So I ended up getting involved in things like chaos magic and like, got involved back into Santeria and stuff like that as an ancestral sort of tradition. And definitely picked up ceremonial magic eventually, leading to getting involved in esoteric societies such as the Ordo Templi Orientis, which is actually where I met Ryan. I was actually giving a talk on this interfaith event called the Parliament of the World's Religions, which would have a major effect on my next major spiritual development. Yeah. But I went to Dublin, which is a sort of ancestral land due to my great-grandfather. And it was one of those ties that like Ryan and I sort of shared. Obviously, he has a much closer connection to Ireland than I do. But
yeah, my family, for the record, like has probably not left like this about a 50-kilometer radius in 1,000 years or so. Like I think I'm probably like I'm the only person in my family who's left the country. And I've come all the way to London, so like I've gone far shores.
True Eric the Red behavior over here, just really striking out to foreign shores.
Yes, I will have a saga of my own someday. But actually, on that, like the Thelema stuff and the esoteric stuff, because I was into chaos magic as well, which is actually. That was probably my window into like Western esotericism, because it was so stripped back. Grant Morrison, the comic book writer who had written Batman Arkham Asylum, he did a great talk, which I'm sure a lot of viewers have probably seen, of explaining sigil magic in the style of Austin Osman Spare. And that was the kind of first time I did like practical, like hands-on ritual, and that was what sort of made me go, oh wow, like there's something to the esoteric traditions. Because for me, like the grimoire stuff, or like the sort of bells and smells of like Catholic magic, it was never really, that was just never, you didn't have to think about it in Ireland, like where I was in Ireland, like in rural Ireland where everyone's Catholic. Maybe in the big cities you might, but you just didn't have to like engage with the religion at all. And that was like the first time engaging with Western esotericism that was actually like, oh, there is, bishops and priests and stuff like that have a long tradition of doing this, black magic or like summoning demons, like the Hammer Horror circle on the floor and the triangles and the robes and the candles and blah, blah, blah. And like that to me, when we met, I wasn't in the OTO. I was in the OTO as a Minerva, which is like the preliminary degree for a grant, like on paper for 2 years, but in practice for 5 days because my lodge exploded into infighting. So when
common story in the OTO. So
yes, the organization of fierce individualists. But when you came to Dublin to talk about the Parliament of World Religions, I wasn't actually a member. I was just really chummy with them. Like, when I was friends, it was a very small camp in Dublin at like a lodge, and I was just you're just friends with everyone. It's a very small scene in Ireland, so you tend to know everyone who's an open occultist out of the broom closet. And yeah, so like I think that was when we met. Actually, tell us about the Parliament of World Religions in details, because I'm fascinated that this thing exists.
Yeah, so back in the late 1800s, there was this attempt by actually esoteric groups, particularly like Swedenborgians and whatnot, who decided to put together this massive worldwide interfaith event to coincide with the World's Fair that was happening in Chicago, I think in 1898. And or 1893, one of the two. But one of the most interesting things about it is it was the first time a lot of people in the upper Western world, particularly in the Americas, were being exposed to things like Hinduism, which Swami Vivekananda represented, very famous sort of Hindu figure at the Parliament. It was the first representation of Zoroastrians also speaking over there. There were, like Buddhists, different esoteric traditions, different Christian traditions, Jews, Muslims, Taoists. Yeah, it was a vast mix of religions sort of gathering together to discuss sort of the issues of their day and also to get to know one another for the sake of like interfaith understanding and peace. And so this tradition actually didn't really kick off, funny enough, until like almost 100 years later, because in between that time there were various sort of parliament inspired interfaith events, and it kind of gave birth to the interfaith movement in many ways. But in the 1990s, revived again in Chicago, and to the point that by the time I went in 2014 for the first time, it was this massive event that was about 10,000 plus people, 100 plus different faith traditions in Salt Lake City. And the Mormons were very hospitable, that's for sure. But like, even then you saw like 3 different types of like Mormon sects represented. So it was fascinating to see that level of openness. And I went as sort of like a small, me and a couple of friends, sort of like Thelemic contingent and everything. But I ended up actually, when I was there, falling in love with another tradition, which was Zoroastrianism. It's the first time I ever had run across them, because in most schools in the Upper Western world were just kind of taught it was like the religion of the old Persian Empire and just kind of like died out. But that was actually my first exposure to that, and like a major revelation that then led to my conversion in 2018. So
yeah, so like how long were you in Thelema for? It was like a pretty whirlwind short couple years, but you seem to be doing a lot in it, didn't you?
Yeah, so I would say I was probably a Thelemite, or at least involved in the OTO, which doesn't necessarily require identification as a Thelemite, funny enough. From 2013 about to maybe 2016, 2017. And left for a variety of different reasons, including organizational imploding, of which has been previously mentioned, and the distastefulness around Alistair Coley himself and everything like that. But yeah, it was very interesting. But one of the things I will always say about it is that it gave a home for like spiritual exploration in many ways, and esoteric exploration for a lot of wayward seekers, wayward thinkers, including yours truly.
It was definitely like, the same in Ireland, like, because despite Ireland kind of being a lot more secular now than it was when I was a kid in the 90s, still like the OTO there had to be, a little bit hush hush. Like, you had to kind of be careful who, you didn't vet people exactly, but you had to be a little bit veiled about the details of what is involved in being a Thelemite, and sort of the more like tantric and kind of like sex magic-y kind of focus of things, because just a lot of polite society would get quite irrationally upset about it in Ireland, and even the UK. Like, I've got friends who are still in it here, and like, I remember there was like a journalist at the occult conference in Glastonbury that had like, spilled the lurid secrets of the public ritual of the Gnostic Mass and stuff like that. And so like in Ireland, like there is still a lot of awareness about like, black magic and darkness and stuff. So like any sort of esoteric, like Western esoteric tradition, like, which I would put Wicca in there as well, or like, neo-paganism, it's always like, no, we're the good pagans. Like, it has to be sort of, sparkles and angels and light, and it's always like with Thelema and like a lot of those traditions, it's just despite how secular Ireland is, like culturally, the Catholic kind of shame stuff and the sort of like superstitiousness and the wariness of outside religions is still there. So it was really cool to like meet a bunch of people in Ireland who were not like that, who are like interested in transgressive religions or like just different traditions and like the sort of more esoteric aspects of spirituality. So like everyone I met in the OTO in Ireland had like 5 other interests or had a different religious upbringing, or was a religious scholar of some sort. And it was really great to meet people like that who are asking these questions that like you were told never to ask in Catholic Ireland. So it is like I'm the same, where I sort of, even though I've turned away from it, it's like I still have a lot of fondness for a lot of what Thelema does when you grow up in a repressive society. Is like very liberating and like very encouraging. But I think most people I know eventually, like yourself, kind of got a bit tired of it, and just the internal politics and stuff was just like, this is noxious. Like, I've had enough, you know, you can kind of take it and do your own thing with it now.
Yeah. There is a level of sort of, I don't want to use the term of like spiritual evolution, but spiritual engagement that sort of develops further throughout one's life, in particular, of what you're seeking, what you're wanting, especially once you develop like a level of understanding. To like paraphrase the Bible, you know, you start putting away those sort of childish things. Sometimes it's sort of like, it's not necessarily that they're like negative. That, you know, every part of my own spiritual process was in itself, you know, important to where I am today. And to ignore it or to think it's just like, oh, I was an idiot back then or anything like that, it does me a disservice, and like a disservice to like how I got to where I am. To be honest, I would know very little about Zoroastrianism if it wasn't for, say, Crowley writing about Zoroaster and Zoroastrianism in very small elements all throughout his vast corpus of texts. And it, you know, it built that sort of curiosity in me further of like seeking more and more and more, because there's something esotericism does, especially Western esotericism, that very few people talk about, which it builds a deeper spiritual curiosity in people that usually you won't get from just like, say, engaging with, say, a major religion or an exoteric expression of the faith and anything like that. And like for example, like being involved in Zoroastrianism, it's always been fascinating to me because it's not necessarily a faith that like closes me off from like other explorations, but nonetheless, it does provide a sort of grounding as well that I think is something that esotericists think about that a lot of people do not, which is sort of like, how will I find this grounding in order to be able to do the great work? You know?
Yeah. I think as well, like it's something in the more recent episodes we've stressed as well, as like the you know, there isn't this very stringent orthodoxy in Zoroastrianism where you do have to kind of figure it out to a degree yourself, like, you know, and like even with the episode we did on the books of Zoroastrianism, you know, you got to take a bit of the Shahnameh, you got to take a bit of the Gathas, you got to take, you know, you have to kind of like assemble it yourself in a way. And I think I really like that about Zoroastrianism. I'm not Zoroastrian, like for the record, but I do really, I mean, I'm learning a lot about it, which is great, which is part of the series because I get to be the audience. But I really do like a lot of that kind of attitude about it, where you do, you know, I'm sure there's people who grow up within Zoroastrian who are told it is this way and this way only by their parents, and then down the line meet another Zoroastrian and go, oh, actually, there's room for debate on that, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons why that led me towards Zoroastrianism. It's a sort of like the emphasis on this sort of free thinking and free will sort of made it so different than, say, like you and I growing up in Catholicism, where we have to be beholden to the magisterium or else. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, you know, it is fascinating because it's not to say that like I agree with every other Zoroastrianism on the planet. There's every other Zoroastrian on the planet. There is something actually beautiful about the fact that I consistently debate other Zoroastrians in the world, and they debate other Zoroastrians, and we all have like our independent ways of viewing things. And you know, it's but nonetheless, it's a united community with like shared purpose. And in many ways, we're all about more the practice, especially the ethical practice of the faith, than everyone holding the exact same belief everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, yeah, I really admire that about the religion, and I guess as well, because it is so small, it's kind of historically, which we've covered, is like it kind of has been repressed or shattered at certain times, and so there's like a lot of lost orthodoxy that needs to be rewritten or like updated, and it's kind of, you can't really have as opposed to like Catholicism, where it's like a very stringent continuation from like the death of Jesus almost till now, which is a long time, which I really like. I was going to ask you what so actually, like, in terms outside of the spiritual path, how you decided to be an academic on these things. How long have you been doing that, and what did you do before the Zoroastrian focus?
Yeah, it was interesting because when I entered into my undergrad for my bachelor's degree, I wanted to do political science, and I was just like a political nut. I was just obsessed with learning as much about like different ideologies and political systems and stuff like that. But then throughout that undergrad process, I just realized this is more of a hobby to me. I actually don't want to make this my life. And I always joke that it took approximately like 3 years of political science to turn me into an anarchist in some ways. So like,
that's like doing religious studies and becoming an atheist in the first.
right, yeah, no, exactly. And so this is I left it. I actually dropped out of my undergrad, and so for the longest while I was just kind of like working, living life, etc. And then ended up sort of re-entering it, partly because the inspiration of one of the lodge masters that I had in the OTO, who was like a mentor of mine, Grant Potts. He was great. He was also head of the religion department at the like Austin community colleges. And I was just like, it might be pretty cool. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, the OTO has this weird amount of religious scholars in it. And so I was just like, I would really love to become a religious scholar. And so I started doing that independently, just based on sort of interest and research and stuff like that. It's that curiosity just built more and more. And I had an ex of mine who was just like, you should try applying for grad school, which I didn't think was possible without an undergrad degree. So, but I looked around and I saw that the University of London, particularly the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, was open to people who didn't have an undergrad, as long as you could prove that you knew what you were talking about. And so I took that difficult process and it worked out. But it was, around the same time that I was entering into, converting to Zoroastrianism. And so I wanted to not just have sort of like a broad base of study with religion, which I do have, but it's more of like, I wanted to focus at first with Zoroastrianism, and new religious movements sort of came in with that, and then esotericism. And so, like right now, in my PhD program here in Berkeley, I main focus of my work is sort of these intersections between Zoroastrianism and Western esotericism. And, so it mixes a variety of different things, like studies of influence, studies of counterculture, studies of Orientalism, studies. And so like, it's sort of funny that like studying Zoroastrianism, because it's had such a broad history, made me have to become a scholar of like 10 plus different things at the same time to be able to even begin to get some level of like complex understanding of what I'm doing. So yeah, no, and I've loved the academic life, and it's really put a focus on what I do. And I mean, it became partly an inspiration for what we're doing here at Soul Roots too. Because you and I have this shared love of learning about different religions, different spiritualities, different cultures, different modes of esotericism and understanding.
Yeah.
And but we also wanted to like be able to share with other people.
Yeah, that's my big thing, because like I have like I'm not an academic. Like I did a BA in video and film, but I spent a lot of time reading academic papers, like be that the sort of my interest in religion or history as well. Like if I'm really interested in like religious or like spiritual history, so pre-Christian religions, and like what did the pre-Christian or the pagan people actually believe, and what was their mentality. Oftentimes, to find that out, it meant reading a lot of papers. Or when you're an occultist and you're trying to do a ritual, and you want, if you have like a anal retentive attention to detail like I do, you want to get as close to the original thing as possible, and not just pick up like the 50th regurgitation from local witchcraft bookshop. So I've spent a lot of time reading academic papers on that, and then sometimes like archaeological papers and things. And you read like just amazing. It's great to just educating yourself, and just like learning granular detail about things is just fantastic and enriching. But it's sort of like a lot of academic findings and a lot of academic studies just sort of languish in a paper that doesn't get read by the people at large. And for me, it's like I've been a filmmaker and a documentarian for like years, and I've done like small documentaries here and there, like nothing particularly major. And it's been great to like take our kind of really nerdy conversations that most people are just completely alien to, and turn those into videos that can be watched online and are like quite easy to understand and stuff. And sometimes it is like a lot of the challenge for the series is actually realizing that we have a baseline understanding that most people don't. Because I remember after the first episode, some of my friends watched it and like, that was really good, but what's Zoroastrianism? So we had to do that very short episode of like, okay, actually, yes, it's a religion, fire, all that.
It is really funny though, that when you mentioned that, it dawned on both of us to be like, oh, wow, we actually should have explained this. And that's why we had to create that episode 0, for those of you who are wondering, of Zoroastrianism 101.
Yeah, it was really funny. It's like, well, yeah, we never actually say in the first episode what Zoroastrianism is. So here it is as a basis. So anytime going forward, when we're covering new topics, we need to do the baseline definitions episode first and then move on. But yeah, for me, it's like I've done, I'm like Alan Moore, where like if I'm doing a writing project or something, I am looking up a level of detail that is completely unnoticed by most people. One example is a comic that me and my ex had made that was set in Ireland, and it is different historical points in Ireland. And there's a sequence in the comic. This is very granular, but there's a sequence in the comic where one of the bog bodies escapes from the Dublin Museum and runs back to where it was found. And I was charting on the map of Ireland where it would cross, if it was going back home, what archaeological sites it would cross. And then I found out it had crossed Summerhill, where there was a battle in like the 17th century. And so that was a sequence. And then I talked to my like reenactor friends, where I was like, okay, what would the people be wearing who are fighting on this side? And so like the costumes are really accurate and stuff. And nobody notices, like nobody cares about that stuff, but I do. And the fact that I can take that and turn it into like a consumable piece of like a comic book or a documentary or whatever it is I'm making, that makes me happy. So
that's the thing. It's just like, I remember so many of our sort of like late nights, 3 or 4 a.m. all the way, for hours conversations where as we're talking, even looking stuff up and like, trying to make sure we have the accurate information. And like, I think that sort of builds into the way we do our videos here too. Like a lot of research goes into these videos, especially on my end when I'm like writing the script and everything like that. And I try to get not just Ryan's eyes on it, because, we're kind of like similar mentality of this. We want to give accurate sort of academic, like, but thorough information. But at the same time, we have that issue of just like, sometimes we forget to explain the basic things. So I sometimes have, like someone like take a look at it. Like, for example, I have my fiance take a look at it, or like I have like a friend take a look at it or something like that, and just to make sure that it's not getting like, because there's a number one critique I have for like academic work sometimes on YouTube or in person is how dry and dense it can be. And it's just, and so it just gets kind of like incomprehensible sometimes. And that's part of why, I try to make sure also and like in particular, we try to present this sort of thing in an engaging sort of way without sacrificing sort of academic rigor and accuracy. Because like there's a lot of stuff that we could continue saying, part of the inspiration for this podcast, obviously, but like, there's like a lot of stuff in the esotericism episode that we definitely wanted to include, and like stuff in like the mythology episode and so on and so forth. But like, it's part of like, what do we want to share that's like our personal interest and not necessarily fully academic, and also what's all the other awesome academic stuff that just couldn't make it in. And this is part of why we have this going on now here.
Yeah, and also like it's a 101 series as well, so it's like you can't really get in the weeds too much, even though it's like painful, because you're like especially the esoteric stuff. Like I'm like, we were talking about the planets in a recent episode and how they're like devas, and it's like, oh wow, that's like really Gnostic. Like, is that related to Manichaeanism or something like that? And it's like we don't have time to talk about it in the episode. So like maybe like with the podcast, like if ever we're like, hey, we should sit down and talk about that one thing we mentioned before, we can do that now, which is great. And
yes, and we've seen the comments of people being like, hey, what about this thing? Or can we see this thing in the next video? Or we even got an email that's just like, oh, if you do like this, could you make an entire video of this? And we're just like, look, guys, we sadly just do not have the time and resources for that sort of deal. But it's also like, as you said, this is just a 101. Maybe there could be in the future as Zoroastrianism 201, 301, what have you. But there's also other projects we want to work on too.
Yeah, exactly. Which let's not talk about them just yet. We have plans. We have plans, but we have some one-off things as well that are in the pipeline. We have a bigger series that we're thinking about, but we have, because we have these esoteric backgrounds and religious studies backgrounds, there's people we've interviewed one or two people where we're like, that's in the back pocket for a future. And so we will be doing stuff like that. That'll just be like very specific topics, and we can really talk shop then. But with the Zoroastrian series, it's 101, so we kind of have to like give it a bit of a hands off. The other thing is like actually like on the detail and the rigor. For me, like, because Pablo does as well, will like find images for me, because I had a meltdown at one point and I was like, please help me, it's so hard to find images for this series. Because the series, like one of the points of the series is like Zoroastrianism is such a like under discussed religion, and like the visual history is really difficult to find on the internet. So it's like
you really realize how under discussed and understudied it is when you start trying to produce stuff like this. Exploring it,
it's crazy. And like just visual history as well, it's like for instance, like on the devas, like there'll be a certain deva that I use in a background, and it's like, or like sometimes as a character. And so I'm going through like archives of Persian miniature paintings. Like the Chester Beatty archive is great, and so it's like royalty free, which is fantastic, and it's high res, which is great. Resolution, another thing that's a bane of my existence, is like sometimes it's that big and you're like, that's so grainy, but that's all you have. But I'm finding the paintings, and then it's like I need someone to just broken it down. Is that this king, or is that this prince, and is that warrior? And so where possible, where I've found like, yes, that is that character, I can cut them out and put the name beside it and say, bam, that's that guy. But that just like, it takes ages to do those things. And I've built a hell of a library, which I'm going to put, once the series is done with, I'm going to put that all online. So like people know there's an online library, which is called the Iran Shah Library, which is like it's like a miniature painting archive where you can like get little characters and play with them. So I'm gonna like throw all our stuff on that once we're done. But even like as well, it's like what is funny. This is like a little fun detail is something we didn't mention it in the episode, but there's kind of a common depiction of Zarathustra that and a certain outfit he has that has this kind of loincloth with like a kind of a arrow thing on it, and he's like pointing up. And most depictions of him I've seen are pulled from that or based on that. And then it's like, well, I was wondering, well, is that what the traditional Mobed outfit used to be like? And it's like, apparently not. Apparently that was based on, was it Mithra? I think it was, or there was a relief somewhere.
It's a relief, carved relief of Mithra on a mountainside or a cliffside in Iran, and it was where the image of Zarathustra was gotten from because of like European and Iranic misidentification at first of that being Zarathustra, but now we know that that's Mithra, but it's stuck as the sort of like garb for Zarathustra.
Yeah, and even like modern Mobeds seem to, and like your priests will like kind of reference it for their own cuts.
Absolutely,
you know? Yeah. it's fascinating, and even like, and we mentioned a thing. Some people, I think this will come up in the comments a couple of times, and we did address it in the episode. But your T-shirt, this is not an image of Ahura Mazda. We know,
the Fravahar,
the Fravahar. It's not. We know it's not Ahura Mazda. I keep using it because it's kind of the de facto symbol of the religion. Please don't tell me anymore, everyone. I know we did say it in the episode. But the imagery, the visual history of Ahura Mazda is also, I think maybe there's two things that are debatably him, but again, it's like for our purposes, the resolution of those images is not great. So,
don't blame us for the fact that like the later Sasanians and the early Middle Persians were iconoclasts. Like, I mean, we have like record that there were probably like statues and images before, but all that's gone to history. But hey, if we rediscover it, we'll be sure to like use it in an episode, but that's probably won't be for a while.
No,
but
the academic work is continuing. But we will I will probably, like, as we're doing more podcasts, like we'll revisit these topics and like long into the future and
absolutely
details about them. But yeah, so like the process of finding, like, because I think there's other videos online that talk about Zoroastrianism, and like their choice of visuals is quite like stock. There's only a handful of things they do. So anytime I've been able to dig online for a couple hours and find perhaps like a very accurate depiction of something, I will. Even book covers, actually, like that's another thing for the book episode. It was like trying to find book covers that we could use. There was one or two where like there was nothing pretty. So
yeah, no, I don't doubt it at all. I mean, like even looking for some of those images, like for example, whenever we look through the script, we're just like, this could use an image, this could use an image. Sometimes looking for an image, like for the book covers, like you were saying, it's just like, wow, okay, so there is one image, for example, the literature episode, there's one image of this book in like, and it's like a Spanish language cover, and that's the only one that actually looks good enough to put on video.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I love visual history like that as well. Mm-hmm. Like, so it's fun for me to try and get as accurate as we can, but then also, we want to get the episode out. So it's like, at some point you have to say, I've spent so many hours trying to find this thing. I'm going to have to just settle for like suboptimal. And then someone will probably find a better one the second the video is uploaded.
No, very true, very true.
Yeah. So where were we? We trailed off there. You're doing your PhD on esoteric influences in Zoroaster, or Zoroastrian influences in esotericism, was it?
Yeah. So it's basically on basically how there is a sort of mutual influence between Zoroastrianism and Western esotericism, but in particular, I think I'm going to focus on like some case studies, for example, on theosophy, Rudolf Steiner and his system of anthroposophy, and also on this fascinating figure here in the Bay Area called Philangi Dasa, who sort of was the first major sort of like Buddhist figure in the U.S., who came from Sweden, and he himself had engaged with Zoroastrianism in a very fascinating sort of way. But it's sort of, my main point is sort of to point out how Zoroaster and Zoroastrianism has sort of been this sort of hidden fire, a title pending for the dissertation, of within sort of Western esotericism. I mean, Zoroaster shows up in anything. I mean, you've seen in our episodes, from like alchemical texts to statues in like courthouses, all over the place within the sort of like upper Western world. But also Zoroastrianism and Zoroaster have been this sort of like haunting figure of European esotericism and Freemasonry and, alchemical and Grimoire texts. Neoplatonism, where like every other book in Neoplatonism is sort of like partially attributed to Zoroaster, like the Chaldean oracles, for example.
Yeah.
And even, in the sort of like turn of the century esotericism, like the Golden Dawn or Temple Orientis, the Rosicrucian revivals, all that sort of stuff. Crowley himself called Thelema as a Pyrrho-Zoroastrianism. And Zoroaster pops up in, anything from like astrology texts to like those little sort of chapbook magic texts and everything like that. And Zoroastrianism even pops up as like the sort of esoteric system that we can learn from, but also has had influence on people straight up questioning, say, European forms of morality, like Voltaire and Nietzsche, most famously,
Of course.
So, yeah, so part of my work is like Zoroastrianism became a sort of countercultural point of authority for Western esotericists and other folks who were in that sort of spiritual counterculture milieu in Europe and North America.
That's really interesting. I think I really love there's that one illustration we use of like, it's like an alchemical plate of Zoroaster with like, he's standing on a dragon.
Oh yeah.
It's like very, very alchemical. But yeah, it seems like, I think like as well, I guess he becomes, with the astrological stuff, it's like he's a stand-in for like, Persians in general, or like Zoroastrians in general, because they have like a very deep understand, like a crazy accurate understanding of like astrological processions. And is it like the calendar, I think, is still used by NASA or something for a certain
Yeah. The solar Hijri calendar, which is the official calendar of like Iran, for example, which is based on itself on elements of the Zoroastrian calendar systems, is the most accurate astronomical calendar system in the world. And so sometimes it is used for like satellite or spacecraft launches and stuff like that. So
yeah,
mostly because you won't risk much if you do use it. So
yeah. That's kind of brings me to like another point about the presentation of the videos. Is that we were something we talked about beforehand. Was that we wanted it, or I wanted it to like look almost sci-fi, like the way we do the series. It's like how I picked fonts and just the way we depict things and everything. It's like oftentimes when people talk about Zoroastrianism, I think it's religion in general, but like Zoroastrianism especially, it's always like sandstone and like papyrus fonts and old paper and
the sepia toned
it's all like the runes of Persepolis, and it's like the idea of it being a modern thing is just not in people's heads. I mean, that's kind of general for religion overall, but definitely doubly so for Zoroastrianism, because like, there's people, and one of our donors for our original Kickstarter or GoFundMe was, you know, their story was like their kid was in class, and one of the Persian empires came up, and Zoroastrianism gets mentioned. The kid goes, "Oh, I'm Zoroastrian," and the teacher apparently said like, "Oh no, that's like that religion's long dead. Don't be telling ibs." Essentially, it's like what, like, you know, it's like there's people out there that don't realize that it is still a modern practice, growing, evolving religion. Small.
I mean, I still get that. I still get that even as like an academic Zoroastrianism. Like, I pop into places and people are just like, "Oh, what do you mean you don't study it from an ancient context? What else is there?" Like, it's like, man, it's still a living religion. It's like 4,000 years old. It's like, you know, it's like there's less than 100,000 Zoroastrians in the world, but it still makes it larger than some religious systems that people still hold as like being modern religions, you know?
Yeah. And it has a continuity as well. It's not like, you know, neo-paganism where it's like you have to kind of reinvent based on speculation of what, you know, pre-Christian people did or something like that. It's like, no, it's like it's been consistent from the Parsi community up until now, especially, or like, you know, Iranians. It's just like it's never completely vanished, you know, so it's still the one religion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which I think I really love sort of the question about, like, you know, this ancient thing, how does it apply to the modern world? And like, I think Zoroastrianism's pretty good about it. Like, you've written a sci-fi story that's based on Zoroastrianism as well. It's like quite cohesive, you know?
Yeah, I got to get that out and publish, but yeah. No, it's really interesting to me, you know, getting that sort of response still, because I think, especially, I mean, if we think about everything from, you know, like Euro and American history to definitely current events, you know, Iran and Persia have been in sort of like the upper Western imaginal for a long while. Like, you know, everything from like if we think back even to like the 1800s, you know, you had like people like Richard Francis Burton, the Mary and Percy Shelley, you know, all these sort of people just mentioning, you know, the Orient and Persia and stuff like that. But you even had it in ancient Greek and Roman times where, like, you know, there was this whole Pseudo-Zoroastrian sort of body of literature, and not just because they were going to war with them, but also like cultural interchange, you know, like Mithraism and stuff like that also developed out of that. And even in the modern era, I mean, from absolutely weird and negative depictions like 300 to to even you know, like its inspiration going into video games like Prince of Persia.
Yes.
You know, inspiration going into fantasy shows like Game of Thrones and stuff like that. You know, it's sort of like it's been just sort of like everywhere. And so when people talk about it and they are just like, oh, it's this old thing, and it's just like, well, it seems to, if it's an old dead thing, it really seems to be haunting us still, you know?
Yeah. And I like the sort of, I'd like that, because it's just, I mean, I need, like, I'm really into Irish mythology, you know, so like I'll read like as early a source I can, and like, you know, the Tawn or something like that, and it's like, these are it's medieval story, so it's 1,000 years, doesn't compare to the length of Zoroastrianism, but like these things that survive this long survive for a reason, and they're very relevant and very immediate, like in their depictions of, you know, humanity. We talked to Dr. Dr. Melville in the Shahnameh Center, and we had a great conversation about mythology, because, you know, there's a lot of similar stories with the Shahnameh and Irish mythology, but she has a great point about why does these, you know, medieval stories still hit so hard, and it's like they're kind of like your family, where it's like they're related to you and your experience, even though they're quite foreign at times or quite alien to you, based on like different times and morals and places, and just the overall milieu of a story. it's kind of these religions are still relevant, and these myths are still relevant. And so, like, with the style of the series, I was actually playing a video game called Ghostwire Tokyo, and I think I just lifted a lot of its sensibilities because it had this almost cyberpunk depiction of like Japanese esotericism and folk beliefs, and I just thought that's really cool because I guess that's how it works in the real world. And Zoroastrianism is no different. So I think probably that's going to be the hallmark of any of our videos that we do is how are they relevant to the modern world, and taking it out of the dust, taking it off the shelf of dusty museums and putting it in your hands.
Absolutely. I think that's very important. I talk about in academia all the time, and as one of the things that I tell people as like our inspiration for Soul Roots is sort of like, there's 3 different kinds of religion. There's sort of like cultural religion where people are just sort of like, oh yeah, for example, it's like I'm Catholic because everyone around me is Catholic, but I don't really do anything about it. I don't go anywhere. I don't do anything. Then there's sort of what I call intellectual religion, which is, you see this a lot with like zealous converts, where it's sort of like, according to text, whatever, this is why women shouldn't eat a grilled cheese sandwich or whatever like that. And like, it's all completely really like mind based and literary based. But honestly, the biggest form of religion in the world by far is folk/lived religion. I mean, and that's what we try to show people here at Soul Roots. So it's like, yeah, we're going to include a little bit of the intellectual and the cultural elements because those are completely important and inform everything about a faith sometimes. But in full reality, the way people express religions is through folk practices and lived religion. It's sort of like, like you said, it's not just a dusty book on a shelf. It is, that book is continuously being, flipped through, pages torn out, new pages being added in, the cover completely changed, drawings from a kid in every other page. It's like, religion is messy, and it's a combination of so many different things, but most importantly, it's a combination of how people live and believe in it and practice it now and have done so throughout its history,
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, like there are people who are, like a lot of people in Ireland who are scarred by the church, they sort of, or like people who are especially like the new atheist movement and stuff like that, where it's like, they look at the, the intellectualization of religion or starting the zealotry of religion and then not want to engage with it at all, where they're just like, oh, a bunch of hokum, and it enables all sorts of abuses and blah, blah, blah. Which does, which is true, but also it's like when you don't have to engage with that part of it. You can just engage with it as a lived emotional thing or as a folk tradition. There's a lot of religions that aren't as never had that or in limited capacity have had that zealotry, and they are almost folk traditions, true and true. Like a lot of Japanese stuff, especially, or like even like pre-Christian stuff is not cohesive, and it is a lived folk collection of beliefs and sort of community-based understandings that aren't necessarily like top to bottom, orders on high say we do this, and shut up if you want to have feelings about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So like, I really like that, and like I think that's kind of this is the thing we connect on a lot and talk about a lot, is just, here's a story from this religion that sort of is quite inspiring, or, talks about this current moment and so on and so forth. So I think as well with the Zoroastrian, like I'm getting a lot of fun from, and a lot of like, food for thought from just doing this series, as like someone who's a step removed from it. Like yourself, like you're in it academically and personally, whereas I get to like ask the audience questions and go like, well, what does this mean or what does that mean? But yeah.
I think it is funny because like I've I've had people come up to me and like, even in sort of like academic spaces or otherwise, just be like, oh, hey, you know, I love what you guys are doing. I love your series, like blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, wow, it's great. You present this information. But I think a lot of people are just really grateful for the sort of visual and editorial representation that you're doing, which is very much a sort of like, some people just talk at the camera. Some people just have like the most amateurish animations you've ever seen, not to like bad talk anyone, but like I think what we offer is sort of like, no, it's like we're not sacrificing your fun in watching this. And so your visual engagement for the sake of also providing you, you know, intellectually rigorous stuff. It's like you're getting both here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, I'm a stickler for details like that, whereas like I love a lot of YouTube channels, but it's hard to do this stuff, and so a lot of people are just like, I can't possibly wrap my head around After Effects. I'm just gonna talk at the camera and that'll do, and it does do. But for me, I like animating, I like using After Effects, I like trying to think visually, how do I depict something, you know, like stuff like the way we depict Minogue in the series, like that is the idea was the backs of Persian miniature paintings often have this kind of mottled gold foil on them, and that made sense, like, oh, it's the layer under the physical, or it's like the imaginal layer before the picture happens, and it's like, oh cool, it's Minogue. So I just recreated that using what I knew how to do in After Effects, and there we go. We've got a depiction of Minogue, and we've contributed to the visual history of Zoroastrianism.
I believe we've created probably more visual Zoroastrian art and history than probably has been for the past 100 years, so honestly.
So every frame is a painting, so millions of frames.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like I want to just, you know, flex my abilities as an animator and editor as well. It's simple for me. It's simple animation, but even small details, like if I'm going to show an image, if I can cut out the backdrop of it so it's just not square, that's just a little bit of detail that kind of comes in that I don't know. And it's really lovely when people say like, oh, someone said it looked like a Discovery Channel episode or something before, and I was so delighted because,
hey, what a compliment, actually.
Yeah. Because, and the thing is, like, it is just me and you. Like we don't contract out anything, or like there's no other editors. Well, the only other thing is the music is by Faria Faraji. He's like
who's a genius. Love that
amazing ethnomusicologist. Go watch his videos, because
we link him at the in the description of every video. Please check out his music, and also the way he talks about music and its history is awesome stuff.
Yeah, that's a similar discipline to how we talk about religions. I don't know. Hopefully, we'll do an episode with him someday. Yeah, we
could have him on the podcast sometime. I'm sure he'd be up to it for that.
Yeah, cool. Well, hey, we're over an hour now, so I think we'll leave it at that, and we will get back to work on the next episode. And
so we'll see you in the next episode, and maybe see you at the next podcast. Thanks for watching and listening, for sure.
Excellent. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.